Hey y'all, welcome to the T-Work podcast, hosted by Grant Banco and me, Adam Morrow. From entrepreneurs and athletes to the rat racers of corporate America and those who refuse to be put in a box, we want to share their stories and understand how they ended up where they are. Success and development come in many shapes and sizes. We want to hear about it all. So grab a drink and pull up a seat. Let's spill some tea and get to
Welcome back to the T-Work podcast. Today we have Jake Fassler, a buddy of mine from Nashville while I lived up there for about 2 years. He was in the Air Force, now currently works at Amazon on their AWS team as a senior data scientist. That's right, I believe. And he's also an adjunct professor at multiple universities. I'm not going to list them off because I don't know them all. I'm going to pass it over to Jake to sort of give his elevator pitch and his background. So thanks for coming on, Jake.
Sweet. Thanks, man. Hey, y'all. I'm Jacob. Jacob, either one's fine with me. I live here in Nashville, like Grant said, been here about 4.5 years. I moved here from Alaska, so I spent 6.5 years in the Air Force. When I got out of the Air Force, I stayed up in Alaska for a period of time and then came down to Nashville. Amazon brought me to Nashville. I worked with the .com side of the business initially, so working with our DSP business, basically forecasting routes that our .com side would work on. And now I work in the AWS side of the business. So I worked within the training and certification organization for about 2.5 years. And now I work within our enterprise support organization, identifying areas of opportunity with sales models and building out ML models to increase our sales opportunities. So it's a little bit about me. Outside of that, I do teach as well, mainly around data science, applied science courses, some econometrics. I fly as well. I'm a flight instructor, learn how to fly outside of the military. Use my VA loan to learn how to, use my GI Bill to learn how to fly. And yeah, it's a little bit about me. Looking forward to this today, though. Sorry I was late, though. I apologize, gentlemen.
Yeah, time zones are tough for Jake. He was a little late. He thought 4 Central and 4 Eastern were about the same thing.
We're working on it.
We'll keep it light first. Going to the pilot side of things for you. Obviously, I've never flown with you. A little scared to go on that journey with you, but you did recently buy a plane. Is that right?
I did. I've got a 1955 Cessna 170B, and a lot of people kind of turn their head when they hear about plane years. So 1955 sounds old. I mean, what, it's 69 years old, coincidentally. But it's a beautiful plane. It's in great shape. Planes go through an annual inspection every year to make sure they're obviously airworthy. So it's a phenomenal plane. I got a great deal on it. It's a tailwheel if you're familiar with those. So I plan to take it back up to Alaska at some point.
And
And
how
what
did
part
you
of Alaska were you in?
I was in Anchorage is where I lived. I've got a lot of family in Healy. So to give you some contextual understanding, there's two major cities in Alaska, Anchorage and Fairbanks. They're about 7 hours apart, 6.5 hours apart. My family lives closer to Fairbanks than Anchorage, but I was living in Anchorage, which is the majority of where people live in Alaska.
I was in Kenai, Soldotna for a
Yeah.
summer. So,
Yeah.
Yep.
Beautiful area. That's south. So like, just to give you some context, Anchorage is probably 2.5 hours north of Kenai Soldotna area. And then Healy is 6 hours north of Anchorage, roughly.
Yeah. Sorry, that's not a pilot question, but I
yeah,
got interested
no,
when I
that's
heard Alaska.
yeah, no, that's a good route. I should probably know this, but Jake, were you born in Alaska? Like, I
No,
actually don't know that background.
no, Illinois. So my parents still live there near Rockford. It's like 80 miles west of Chicago. And that's where I was born, went to high school, and then when I joined the military. But I've got some family up in Alaska, like I mentioned, so I spent a lot of time during the summers up there with my family. And then when I joined the military, I was in Virginia Beach for a period of time, and then moved around a little bit. And then my other duty station was Anchorage.
So did you go to college after in the military, or I know you said you used your GI Bill
Yeah,
to learn to fly.
yeah.
Curious how that all fits in. You're obviously a professor at a handful of schools and you seem to be doing okay. I'm curious if this is one of those fake it till you make it situations, or
Mm.
school's just not that important.
No, I think fake it till you make it's a good. I wouldn't say necessarily there, but I'm a big believer of like I think everybody should fake it till they make it, like with whatever career they want to do. Not necessarily fake it, but you need to take those actions in order to do it. So I'll give you a little bit of background on my education. It's interesting. Joined the military at freshly at 19, so I had some college background, some community college background. So my junior and senior year of high school, I was doing a program where we like the half of your day you'd go and do community college. So I had some credits there. I did one semester of college after college at the community college and just I was a fuck off of a student. Didn't do well, and that's why I decided to join the Air Force. We have something called the Illinois, like I mentioned, I enlisted out of Illinois. We have something called the Illinois Veterans Grant, IVG. So there's 2 states that have something similar. Illinois has the IVG, and then Texas has something called the Hazelwood Act. And what that does essentially is, let's say I enlist from the state of Illinois, I get unlimited public education to a public school in Illinois while I'm in the military. So what I did was I concurrently went to multiple graduate schools at the same time. So that's how I burned through so many graduate degrees. To kind of answer your question, I got my bachelor's at, it's called St. Leo University. It's a school out of Florida, actually. I never actually went to the campus. They're on most military institutions, like St. Leo partners pretty heavily with the military. And I did like in-person schooling at Langley Air Force Base, which is in Virginia. I did my undergrad in business administration, project management, logistics, my minors. And then I wanted to go do my MBA right away. But being that I planned on using the IVG, there wasn't a school in Illinois at the time that offered an online MBA program. Now, looking forward, University of Illinois has one of the best MBA programs, and it's all online. And that's where I did my MBA at. It's called the IMBA through University of Illinois. And then I did a handful of other graduate degrees as well from schools in Illinois. And then I did my doctorate degree at University of Illinois, and that's in organizational leadership.
That's quite the schooling background.
It's all paid for, man. So like to give you some context on the VA loan, or I'm sorry, the GI Bill, GI Bill, a lot of individuals. So anybody that joins the military and they're in the military for, I believe it's over 3 years. Don't quote me on that. I think it's over 36 months and you're honorably discharged, you get the GI Bill. And what that is it's essentially 4 years of school that's paid for. And you also get something called BAH, Basic Allowance for Housing. So why it's incentivized is a lot of individuals will get out of the military. They'll go, let's just use Nashville for an example. They'll go to Vanderbilt and then they'll get paid a BAH, a housing allowance, which it changes based on your locality. Here it's like $1,600 a month, but you only get it while you're going to school and you get your school paid for. I didn't see a benefit of waiting to get my education when I get out. To me, it was just kind of like I could do it while I was still in. So then once I got out, I hit the ground running. I never planned on making a career out of the Air Force. Like that was never the intent from day one. I wanted my education. I wanted to do something, it gave me structure, and it was allowing me to travel. So that's why when I got out, I had my GI Bill and I didn't have anything to use it for. I didn't really need to use it. I have no kids. I can't pass it on. So, and it doesn't expire. Thank you, President Trump made that addition, where previously your GI Bill used to expire after 5 years of not using it. Now it doesn't expire. So I just use mine on flying and I still have about half of it left. So one day I'd like to maybe fly a helicopter if I could find an educational program to do that and just continue using it.
When did you know that like you fell in love with flying? Because like I don't feel like that's something easily to come about. It's like, oh yeah, I like flying. So how did that come about?
If you go to Alaska, that's like everybody flies. So I think that's where it kind of set in for me. Like whether it's float plane flying, whether it's flying on skis, whether it's like backcountry flying, just flying's a part of the culture in Alaska. And when I learned that you could go do this, you could go take yourself hunting and go in these like remote areas and fly, I was very interested in it. Obviously, being in the Air Force, I worked pretty heavily around aircraft, and just flying always seemed cool to me. Nobody in my family's ever flown. So learned a little bit up in Alaska, took some flight lessons, and then I actually got my license. I got my private pilot's license in Illinois when I got out of the military. And then when I moved down to Nashville here, I did my instrument rating, which essentially allows you to fly through the clouds. It's IFR, that's what it's called. Then I did my commercial pilot's license, and then I did my certified flight instructor, so CFI. So a lot of people don't know, I'll expand upon this a little bit. A lot of people don't know kind of like how commercial pilot works. Getting your commercial pilot doesn't mean you can like go work for Delta or any of those. You have to get something called your ATP, airline transportation pilot, and you have to have 1,500 hours for that. So really what a commercial pilot allows you to do is like go do things like aerial photography, banner towing operations. Like if you ever seen those banners around, you could do that, which by the way, that's pretty badass. If you've never, I don't want to do that, but like check a video out of that sometime. So how the banner operations work, they put the banner on the ground and like, basically think of it like a field goal almost, like 2 sides and the banners across it. So the plane takes off, he comes back around, he has this hook that he throws out the back, so it's attached to his tail. He dives down like between the field goal things, scoops the banner up and flies away with the banner. Like that's how you pick it up. It's pretty wild to see. So you can go do that as a commercial pilot. mainly aerial operations, like aerial photography and like sightseeing is what a lot of people do, or skydive. Like if I wanted to go fly around people and throw them out the back for skydiving, you can do that. But to me, I never wanted to like go do be a pilot as a full-time career or anything. I got my CFI because it was paid for, like the GI Bill I was mentioning, but also like I could take Grant if he ever wants to go, or other individuals that want to learn how to fly, and I could take them flying. We could log the time and kind of teach them how to fly as well. So that's something I really enjoy.
And going back to the Air Force real quick,
Yeah.
what was your role while you were serving?
Yeah, primarily focused on operational deployments. So working out of Alaska. When I first joined out of Virginia, I worked within egress escape systems, so ejection seats. So worked mainly around individuals working on F-22s, like when they would escape, how an individual pilot that needs to escape behind enemy lines, how do they escape, get out of there safely, and how does that whole process managed? Then I did operational planning, and that was more so really understanding where we're going, why we're going, what task forces we need there, how we get there, and then obviously operations on the ground. So I I went to Dubai twice. I had two really cool stints to Dubai. I worked out of the embassy one time and then also out of Al Dhafra Air Base, which is between Abu Dhabi and Dubai. And that was really cool. That was one of the cooler operations that I've got to work with in Dubai because it's obviously a safe area in the Middle East, but it's a TOC. So it's Tactical Operations Center where, think about it, you have a lot of very high quality or high price targets in the Middle East, but you don't want to have your jets in those areas. Like you don't want to have $100 million F-22 sitting on the tarmac in Afghanistan or somewhere. So it'd be somewhere like Dubai or somewhere like that where it can get in and out of that AOR, that area of responsibility, pretty quickly.
And
What I was
you
gonna
can
say,
take
what?
it. I was gonna
Yeah,
ask a
what?
really dumb question.
Yeah, what's up?
No, go with the dumb question first, and then we can go ahead.
If we ask you to list how many abbreviated phrases you know, how many do you
Fuck.
think you could go with?
You know what? I've been out of the military for about 5, 6 years now, so I think there's a lot there. But working at Amazon, it's very much the same. I'm sure you all are familiar with that as well. But like, we have so many. To give you a number, I would say probably 200. But don't ask me what to do it right
I
now.
mean, you've already dropped 8, I think, on
All
this
right.
podcast so far.
Yeah, in your intro, you fired off about 7 where I was like, I probably should interrupt and be like, hey, what does that mean? But
Fair
you
enough.
were
Yeah, interrupt.
you kept firing, so I was just letting you go.
Interrupt me at any time. Let me know.
Yeah, but
Sorry
I
for the
was gonna
dumb
ask.
question.
Not dumb.
No such thing as a dumb question.
Right.
So kind of give the timeline of like when you served and like what was going on in the military at that time, like kind of give that background.
Yeah, 13 to 19. So 2013 to 2019 was the time frame. We had a number of different things. Obviously, Obama was in when I first joined. Trump was in towards the latter end of my military career. And that was kind of cool to see just the various aspects of like leadership, especially when you're in a deployed environment. You have these individuals come through, like Ash Carter, he was our Secretary of Defense. He worked with us pretty heavily and like coming over into some of these AORs and like just meeting some of these high level individuals. Joe Biden, your boy Joe Biden, was the vice president at the time. So obviously Obama was our president, and true and powerful JB was the vice president at the time. So got a lot of issues going on. I mean, anything from 2013 to 2019, especially dealing with the Middle East conflicts that we had at those times. Obviously, wasn't a ton of wars going on during that, comparatively speaking to like your 2008s through like 2012. You had some pretty heavy conflict going on there, but not a ton. I will say the one thing that I am very thankful about with the military is just like the opportunity to go see many different things and like go and just be exposed to these opportunities in these environments. Coming from a small town and just exploring, going out, I think the military is one of the best paths that anyone can take if they really don't know what they want to do. Now, I won't fully advocate that and be like, hey, just join the military blindly, because I do think there's probably a lot of shitty roles that you wouldn't want to do long term as a career. However, there's a lot of things that you could do, and it just sets you up well. If you do 4 years, get your education, get out, and go figure out what you want to do as a result afterwards.
What kind of give the background of like the process of joining the Air Force? Like, how did you get into your role and like figure that out?
Man, to be completely honest, it fell on. So going all the way. So you go to something called MEPS, military. I don't know. It's an acronym again. I don't know what it stands for. Something. Basically, it's like your medical process. So maybe it's like medical evaluation process screening. Maybe that's what it stands for. You go to MEPS when you first identify that you want to join the military. They like make sure you're fit to do it. You go through everything. After MEPS, you get like the green light of like your health is good. Then you essentially get a contract of like what your job is. Now, this is where some people can be very particular, and they will only take a contract based on what they want, like if they knew what they wanted to do. An example, let's say I wanted to join and I wanted to be like a load master, which is a cool job. It's basically you're the individual, awful name, by the way. Imagine being the load master. But cool job because they fly all over the country or all over the world with C-130s, and they basically just like make sure the luggage is tied down properly. And that's definitely not giving them enough credit because there's so much that goes into that in terms of like center of gravity, because your plane's here and you need to make sure where that weight is accordingly. And it's all the load master's responsibility to make sure that that plane can operate within limits. But what I am saying with this example is a lot of people will come in and they say, I want to be a load master. And there's not a ton of load masters within the Air Force. It's a good sized career field, but if you want to be a load master, you're likely waiting for a period of time for that specific contract. I went in open general specifically with what I went into, found a role basically based on your aptitude. So you take the ASVAB as well, which we all took, and I think everybody takes their junior year of high school. And the bars, no, I think everybody does. Maybe not. Maybe.
I've never
Maybe
heard
we
of
just
that.
had
So.
a different name.
Yeah, ASVAB is like it's like the standardized test. I thought everybody took it, like similar to your SATs.
We had the Ohio graduation test.
Not familiar with that one, man. What's that? Count to 10?
It's just Ohio's graduation test. I mean, I don't know what to tell you.
We learned how to count to 10, man. Pass it up.
Yeah. No, so Benko and I making those faces was not for you to stop telling the story. I mean, I'm still interested. I just don't think I ever took this test.
Yeah, neither did I. But I will interrupt and say MEPS is Military Entrance Processing Station is what it says on.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I got you. Google helps.
There's something wild about MEPS that I'll never forget. So like at MEPS, there's just like you'll go in groups, obviously, because there's doctors there, and then they gotta evaluate you. See, like get naked in front of these doctors, but there'll be like a group of 4 of you just like waiting for the doctor, just like all standing there naked, like waiting for the. It's just like this weird situation, man. Like MEPS is just awkward. Like you never met these people before. You're like waiting to go to like the doctor's gonna evaluate you, and you're all just like chilling there naked. It's weird, but yeah, it's odd. Not to get off topic on that, but joining the military, like once you get a contract, then you go to something called basic military training, and basic training is not tough. It's 9 weeks long. It might be 10 weeks long now. It's in for the Air Force, at least it's in San Antonio, Texas. For the Navy, it's in Illinois. Like I don't know where they're all at, but for Air Force specifically, it's down in Texas. There's only like 2 weeks of it that I would say are difficult. More of it's just like learning how to just shut up and just do things, quite honestly. If I was to give anybody advice on like going to basic, it's just like shut up and just realize you're not the dumbest person there. There's always going to be somebody far more dumb than you in many aspects. And if you can just get by with that, you can get through the 8 weeks. Like there was a lot of times I would meet individuals and I'd wonder like, how did they get here? How did they figure this out? But to me, that gave me a lot of motivation. Like, hey, if they can figure this out, I think I can get this thing as well. So I'll pause there for questions.
Yeah. Did you, knowing your personality and the stories and talking, how long did it take you to realize to be quiet in certain situations during basic?
Pretty quick, I learned that. One of the biggest things is like don't volunteer. Like they'll pitch it very well. Like, oh, we need somebody to do this job, and it'll be like, here's a good one. We need somebody to be like the fire monitor, right? Like in charge of like to make sure fires don't occur. And like this is just a job to make sure you take the trash out. Like, oh, Grant is the garbage boy, like the fire monitor, right? Or like another thing is like they call the bathrooms latrines, something I never heard prior to the military. And like you'd be like the latrine cleaner. And it's like, dude, don't volunteer for anything. Like take a job, get out of there, move on.
So you volunteered a lot, didn't you?
Initially, I was like, hey, dude, that sounds, I can help out with that. And I'm like, oh man, this is not what I'm looking for. But
and then you bit off way more than you could chew.
I wouldn't call it that. It's just like, why did I do this? You know what I mean? And also the structure, Adam, you don't know me as well as Grant, but like being serious 24/7 something very difficult for me. And like the seriousness of the military candor, like all the time during basic training was tough for me. Just because like you got to stand in this line, and like I don't know, I always like make light of things and I joke about things often. So that was probably my hardest thing, just like shutting up and just like staying there. But it wasn't hard.
I have kind of a specific military personnel question that I heard get discussed on another podcast recently, and you discussing the aptitude of maybe some of the people that joined with you.
Yeah.
I have heard that the quality or the aptitude of individuals who are joining has continued to fall. Do you have any insight on that? Is that worrisome for us as a country from your perspective as someone who's already served and been in there? I don't want to put you in a spot where you're not comfortable talking about this,
No.
but I have never come close to doing anything with the military, and I know Banco hasn't either. So this, like, all I did was hear this on a podcast, and I was like, wow, that's a crazy thing to think about. Like, the kids who are joining are the kids that couldn't get into the colleges. So they doing this as a last resort instead
Yep.
of what they actively want to pursue.
I would say 100%. I don't have any data to support that to say like, hey, here's where our aptitude levels are going and they're trending in the negative direction year over year. I don't have that. But what I will say is this, like we definitely do have recruiting issues going on. And I think we can see that across the board, whether it's in the Air Force on the enlisted or the officer side, whether it's in the Army, whether it's really in any of our branches, we're having a lot of issues getting individuals in the door. Problem one. Another big problem with the military is I think it gets the wrong term. Like I think a lot of people think about joining the military and you're just going to be this like gung-ho individual just going out there every single there's so many jobs in the military where you can be like a nurse, like in the Air Force we have so many medical jobs. I knew people who were like dentists or chaplain assistants and like they were in the military and like that was their job. So kind of bring this back, I do think that we have a recruiting issue. Yes, I think a lot of it goes back into culture. And I also don't think that our military, for just being 100% transparent, I don't think being in the military has the honor it used to or one day did. I don't think they get that notoriety, or I don't think they're not kind of viewed in the proper or in the light that I think when I was younger they might have been viewed at. Like let's look at the same thing as like police or like firefighters. Like I remember when I was younger that was like one of those kind of pedestal roles to take. And now it's just kind of like almost in society, just another role. And I don't think it should be that way. When I run for president one day, Grant and I are going to run together one day. One thing though, I do believe that we should take roles like that and we should pay them accordingly. Like teachers, for example, I think teachers should have a much higher salary because it's then going to attract better individuals to come in there and actually teach our future education individuals. Police officers, I think that if you pay them higher amounts of money, it's going to bring better individuals and talent to the operation of your field. So yes, I do think that we have a retention issue. It does scare me a little bit, but also at the same time, we have to think about, is war fought in the same way it used to be? And the answer is no. I think the big issue that I get scared of when it comes to manpower numbers is like these other countries aren't having those issues. Like let's just take China anecdotally. China's army is growing significantly. It's like, okay, that's kind of an issue that we're not matching with. So yeah, I think we could go down that hole of like, is this something to be worried about? I think as a country, we need to have better leadership and guidance as far as like where our military is going to go, because without a proper military in place, we don't really have that stable of a country.
Interesting. I don't have like I mean I have no perspective on this because
Right.
I've never been involved. All I can do is ask questions from the comfort of my seat in my house in Savannah, Georgia. I mean, I live a very comfortable life in that regard, but I find this topic very interesting. And I do want to kind of stick. I know it wasn't the intention of entirely having you on today, but I'm just very I'm enthralled with the topic.
Yeah.
Is now you talk about war being fought differently. Do you think that would also, though, require a higher level of education to get in because so much is done from a computer or engineering base instead of just being grunt force on the ground?
Logic tells you yes, but like the military, how they train you is they'll teach you everything. So like a big part of basic military training is like they want you to forget everything that you knew prior. They teach you a new way, and then like organizationally, they teach you to work in unison together. So yes, structurally, like the question asks, like, hey, if we're fighting war in a different way, how do we train these individuals, or should they be smarter than they once were? Should that baseline continue to increase? Logic says yes, but I do think that proper procedures are put in place. Like we have good training mechanisms, and I don't think just an individual, let's say Adam or somebody third party was joining the military as an 18-year-old individual today, they're not going to be put into a position to have that power per se to like they'll have managerial process in place. It's very much you have the proper training in place, the proper structures. Like there's checks and balances as far as manpower and like what you're doing as far as like scope of work. So I will say that's not worrisome on that front. I do think that we need more individuals joining the military. because it gives so many individuals opportunity to go do things, to go learn things, to go travel. Because I see so many students, or I talk to them working at Amazon, they come join Amazon, first role they're looking for, and they're $100,000 in school debt. And it's like they're 24 years old and they've never left their home state or their college or whatever. And while that might be what some people want, I do think that more people should see the avenue of opportunity that's open. Like, hey, go serve your country for 4 years, do something, go travel and get everything paid for. And to me, that is well worth the money or well worth my time of investment.
So what do you think is going wrong in recruiting?
A lot of things. Where do I start? I wouldn't point the fingers at recruiters individually. I just don't think that we incentivize being in the military like it once was. Like signing bonuses aren't necessarily there, and like they once were. I don't think the ideology of serving the country is necessarily as honorable as it once was, and I think that's a cultural thing that we need to readjust. It's not one person that's going to come in and solve this. I think it's definitely a culture thing, and it all comes back to like our big culture issue here in America, in my opinion. It all starts with the individual. Like, I don't think any one person, whoever that may be, can come in and make a massive change for this country. I think it has to start at the individual level to get better every single day. And when we get enough individuals getting better, that collective output is going to rise as a country. And it comes back to individual pride here in America, in my opinion. I just don't think individuals are driven enough to make this the best place, and we need to change that.
Okay. Banco, I've asked a lot of
I was,
questions.
yeah, no, I was going to go down that route, and I thought he was going to expand more on like.
Oh, you're good. What's up?
Yeah, no, I thought you were going to expand more on just like, I mean, you said the pay for like firefighters, police force, et cetera.
Yeah.
You've talked about signing bonus. You've talked about culture. I mean, you've jokingly and seriously said you want to run for president and stuff like that. I mean, from that perspective, I mean, again, it doesn't come down to one person, even in that high of power. Like they can only do so much. They can set like a standard and an example, but like at the end of the day, like it's going to take a lot of people.
Sure.
But from your perspective, like from the top down, what do you think would be beneficial to change that culture and viewpoint from the American people of like, because you're right. I mean, I never even debated going to the military route. Like it was like, I'm going to college. That is what I'm doing. That is the route I'm taking. Like it is not like that. I didn't even talk to the recruiters. It was just like, oh, that they're over there. I'm not going to even entertain that. So what, from your perspective, helps with that?
Understanding that, I think first and foremost, I think more individuals need to see the diversity of roles that are offered in the military. And I can only speak to the Air Force because that's where I have experience, but the Navy, the Marines, Coast Guard, there's so many roles. And it doesn't just have to be active duty, because that's a big hang up that a lot of individuals have. They don't want to go and leave home. They want to still stay here. You can be in the Air National Guard. You can be the Army Guard, where you still stay local and you're part of the Guard for 30 days, or I'm sorry, for a weekend. But that's beside. Where I think the biggest change needs to come from is a few things. I think that we need to properly structure what can be done when you join the military. And that's why I think I'm so vocal about it individually. When I see young kids that don't know what they want to do, I was in that exact same position. Nobody guided me through the military to say, like, this is how the Illinois Veterans Grant works. Like, you can get all this college and then hit the ground running and go move on and get a job. I think if they could see that and like see a walking example of like, I could do that as well as a 19-year-old individual and continue to move on, I think that would help out. From a policy standpoint, I think that's going to be a tough question, because I think we got to first identify like what our objectives are. Do we need more people in the military? Like, what are we trying to do? I think we do, but that's like without data that I have in front of me. I think in order to make it a career that we need people to go into, we need to further make it like that pedestal job again. Like, we really need to honor those people that serve our country, that serve, whether that's in a law enforcement here locally, like in our own country, stateside, or whether that's military contractors elsewhere. I just think that those individuals need to have the credit that they deserve. And then maybe more individuals from the younger generation will see that as an opportunity and be inspired to go do something like that.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense.
I don't have like the golden
change.
bullet. Yeah, I don't have like the gold or the silver bullet. This is what we do, but I think we do need a structural change on like how we feed that process, like how we get the right.
Yeah. I don't think there is a right answer. I mean, I think that's the struggle. It's everyone thinks there's a one right answer, and there isn't for a lot of things. I'm going to take it a little bit back to sort of specific to you. You like flying. You joined the Air Force. Why were you not a pilot in the Air Force? Like, why didn't you go that route?
I didn't like know that I liked flying when I was in the Air Force, right? And then when I was in the Air Force, obviously working around all of these jets, planes, seeing it, I'm like, this is really, really cool. And then I got to take a flight in a T-38. It's a trainer aircraft. So a lot of our pilots fighter pilots, well, actually all pilots fly a variation. They go through UPT. pilot training and you fly different airframes. When I was in Virginia, one of the big training aircrafts is a T-38. The T on the front just stands for trainer, 38, just like an F-22 fighter, F-35. The T, anything on that is always a trainer. When I flew in that though, it was awesome. It's got a fast roll rate, climbs at, I don't even know the numbers. It's insane. It's this jet that just flies, rips around. It's like think of like driving like a Porsche 911 just in the air. Like this is just a nimble aircraft. When I did that, I was like, this is really cool. But the problem is, if you want to be a pilot in the Air Force, pilots have a 10-year commitment. And go back to like what my initial goal was, I didn't want to stay in the Air Force. So that's why I never really wanted to go seek that out. Knowing what I know now, if I was to go change and do it again, I would go be a C-130 or a C-17 pilot, like for heavy cargo. And I'd go do that for 10, 11 years. And then I would go jump over to somewhere like UPS or FedEx. And they are making very good money at 10 years out of their career. They have all of this military time. They got to go all over the world flying really cool missions, quite honestly, being pretty safe most of the time. It's not like you're going into bad like AOR environments. I mean, you're going to some pretty cool places, remote places to drop off logistical needs and things like that. But that's what I would do going back. But I didn't really want to pivot and just say, hey, this is what I want to do. And like still to this day, I wouldn't want to go fly as a career. So I'm glad what I did and it worked out how it worked out.
And not to take a dig at you, did you wear
Yeah.
glasses? Did eyesight come into play with that? Because I feel like that's definitely something that comes into play for pilots.
It's like, what's up with those glasses, man? No, I've got great vision. I wear glasses when I work just because I've got a pretty large setup here. I work from home a lot of the time and my monitors are pretty large and glasses help me because I get a little bit flustered with just sitting in front of the monitors. But no, eyesight wasn't an issue for me. Quite honestly, and that's another thing I think a lot of individuals get hung up about, saying like, hey, I need perfect eyesight to go be a pilot. You don't. I don't know what it is, but I know a lot of individuals with contacts or it's just vision corrected as a pilot. So if individuals are watching this, like young individuals, and they want to go be a pilot, I would say go do it. If it's something that interests you, it's such a cool career field. Like I know of quite a few individuals that work for major airlines, whether it's Delta, United, Southwest, whoever it is, they've got great lives. I mean, outside of the fact that they travel a lot, like they might leave out of Nashville and like the one, for example, is based out of Atlanta and he has to go from Nashville to Atlanta to start his work week. But obviously it's all paid for from work, but they only work 7, 8 days a week. I mean, granted, you are away from family a lot, but it's a great job. And it quite honestly, it's not hard on the body and it's fun to do. But
7, 8 days a month,
yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
What did I say?
Yeah.
7, 8 days a week.
Oh, my bad, dude. 7 days a month.
Tough
Yeah,
work
yeah.
week.
My bad. Yeah, 7 days a month. Like, because they're
Just
on,
making sure.
think about it. They're on like 2 days at a time and then they're off for like 5 days. And then they're back on for like 3 days and they're back off for 6 days, whatever it may be. They're all different. And a real pilot that flew for an organization could speak to it better than I can.
No, we'll trust you.
I'll
We'd
be-
rather do that.
I'll be the
until we know
resident
pilots.
SME for the day, I suppose, but I don't think that I'm worthy.
Until we know
There's another
somebody in
acronym.
that
Good for
role,
you.
we would rather just trust you rather than Google it.
That's right.
One more military question from me, at least. Looking back, what's been the coolest? Like, what's the coolest story or coolest thing you did while you were in like serving?
There's nothing that like stands out individually. I think if I was to kind of the one thing I'll say I miss, I'd rather answer that question, is just kind of like the brotherhood or like the camaraderie of the military, like getting out of the military. When you're in the military, you're just with a bunch of individuals that are semi like minded and you can make friends very easily. So I will say if I was to give into anyone that was leaving the military one piece of advice, like it is a little bit difficult to, I don't want to say make friends, but like in the military, like you almost made these friends instantly because you worked with them, like you were together all the time. When you go out of that, it's just different. So I do think a lot of veterans struggle with that. So kind of thinking what was the coolest thing is just there's always cool people to like meet with in the military and you can make a lot of really good friends. Experience wise, the travel, like living just around the world, in my opinion, as paid too as well. I think that was probably my favorite part.
I'll throw another military question at
Yeah.
you. This is something that I struggled with. So in my very brief consideration, so I had a brief moment where I was recruited to play baseball at Air Force Academy.
Okay.
And I thought it was really cool. Their program's good. And then my dad said to me, Adam, I know how you work. Could you handle being told how to think for the next 8 years of your life? And I was like, you know what? You're right. this would go very poorly for me. And like that's all it took for me to just stop considering it on the spot. Is that an unfair prejudice that me and my father had, or like how do you combat that? Because I know it's not that you're trying to strip an individual of who they are, but you also need people to be able to fall in line, be a part of a unit, and understand that they're a part of something greater than themselves. So like where is it on that spectrum? Because I'm going to assume it's not as far as my dad and I had it in our conversation. And I also know it's not as far as you can be whoever you want to be, no matter what, at all times, and always speak your mind.
So I will say, I'll start with, it's not a dig towards your dad individually. It's just kind of that mentality across the board. I do think we need to change that.
Okay.
I understand from a parent standpoint, it is a good question to float to your child. I get that 100%. But what I will say is, it's not like you're getting there and you're just being told how to do every single thing and you can't have any level of autonomy yourself, right? You come together and you bring individual values to the table as a team. I will say about the military forcing you how to think, I think everybody goes through this process. It's just very condensed in the military. You're told how to do it in a matter of time and you have to execute on that. So my biggest takeaway from the military, like the at least like learning how to be to learn or to do things, is a term like shut up and color. It's just like you might not want to do this. It's just you have to do it at this time. And I still to this day think about that a lot. And I think, is this one of those issues where you just shut up and color? Like just shut up and do it. And that's just a kind of an example of it. But to solve that, I think more so we need awareness of what the military can offer. And like, it's not like individuals are fighting their drill instructor. Like, you'll hear some people, they'll be like, hey, why didn't you join the military? And then they'll say, oh, if somebody got in my face, I'd knock them out. It's like, dude, I've never once ever heard of anything like that. That doesn't happen. It's just people that say they were going to join the military and they can't handle somebody telling them no. I think everybody's willing or able to mold to something, and it's for the better, in my opinion. So, did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it's a perspective question. That's all it is. Because I mean, Banco can tell you, obviously, he knows me better than you do. Um, I tend to be a tad bit of a free thinker
Okay.
in not so much a like I'm not always trying to buck the system. I just tend to do things my own way and I kind of always have. So like even to the extent that something is comparatively much less structured than the military, a college baseball team,
Mhm.
like I'm not always going to fall in line from a like mental perspective. Like I'm going to share how I think and I can find myself in some shitty situations because of it. So because my father knew me, I think he knew that that might not be the best thing for me to do. Because
Yeah.
I would say I haven't done it to a detriment in my life. Like I haven't gotten in trouble because of it. But there's probably been times where I should have just shut up and colored instead of just speaking my mind on things. So I was more just curious to hear your perspective on that free thinking ability that an individual might have, or the personal autonomy as you stated it.
I would say I'm very much like that as well. How I self-identify as far as like free thinking, that nature. That was a challenge for me. I like to know the why behind things, like very much so. And in the military, I think that was my hardest thing initially, of like just like falling in line and shutting up in color. It's like, why the hell are we doing this? It makes no operational sense or efficiency. And I think that's a big part of the mental game with the military. It's just like, hey, here's what you're told to do. Let's do it. Don't ask why. I still to this day ask why about everything, but I do have that level of understanding. Like, okay, it might not be beneficial for the organization or the team for me to continue asking why. Just shut up and color. It's a good task I've learned. I struggle
I,
with it. I struggled with it, but we've gotten better.
I think I personally, if that was allowed, I would be fine. It's just because I still operate with the mind of a 4-year old where I always want to know why.
Welcome to
And
the team.
I'm generally not going to shut up until I know why. So
Yeah.
that would have been my greatest issue. It'd be like, oh, who's the bald dude in your platoon? It's like, oh, the dude that won't stop asking why. Yeah, he's the reason that we're always in trouble.
You learn. It's not as bad as you think. Like, I think a lot of times individuals that hear stories outside of the military, they're just one off, two off, and they think that's how the entire military operates. It's not. Basic training sucks. Like I mentioned, it's just like you're told what to do. But after that, you're kind of like an adult. Like I mentioned, you go out to, so after you graduate basic training, you go to your tech school, or AIT is what it's called. Don't ask me what that stands for as well. Something, I think AIT is the Army version. I think it's Army something training. But basically in the Air Force, it's called tech school, and that's where you go and you learn your job. So based on what your job is, you go there and you're almost like a dorm room kid at that point. Like previously you lived in this big dorm with like it's just one bay where like there's bunk beds and there's 50 of you. That's how basic training works. When you get to tech school, it's like you and two others in this like dorm room, and you're essentially like dorm room kids, like college kids wearing a military uniform and like going to class, but it's training, right? So there is that, and you're very free thinking, like you can go out on the weekends, like do that kind of thing, but like it is still the military, very much so. There's still structure very heavily. The structure is what I loved about the military. I'm a very structured individual as it is, and it just fit in well with what I want and what I want to do. So I never had any trouble on that. Where I had trouble was just, why are we doing this? Like, why does this make sense? But I think that's part of the molding the team together as one.
Banco,
Advanced
you figured
individual
out
training, by the way.
what
Yeah.
was
Thanks.
it? Sorry.
Thanks, GB.
Advanced individual training.
Perfect.
Yeah. But Adam, that's why you went the entrepreneurial route too, because of your personality, I think.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
definitely
I mean, there's no way I was going
plays
to
into your
listen to.
personality.
I wasn't going to listen to anyone in the workplace either. Like this wasn't just a military thing for me. I mean, that was really just me to my core. There's no way I could do a corporate job either. I could not have a boss tell me something without giving me the why behind it. So yeah, entrepreneurship made sense in that regard.
But I also
Yeah.
think like, you go ahead.
Go ahead,
I was
Jake.
gonna
No,
say,
Jake,
No,
you
you're
go.
good.
no,
It's
on the
your
other side,
episode.
on the other side of it, I was going to say that I think that's a beneficial thing from a managerial standpoint. So, like, if you know that you feed off of the why, when you're in a position of leadership and you have other individuals and you feed them that why, I think that's a very beneficial thing for team growth. Like in my prior role, I managed a team and I operate very heavily off the why. And I think that I lead from a managerial standpoint with the why. And knowing how I am, I feel like if you can transfer that to your other individuals, it's very beneficial.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you fully there. I I can make it make sense as a leader. It's not that I need to be solo on all ventures. It's just when I have to conform is where I personally struggle.
I get
But
that.
yeah, like I would tell you I respond best to coaching, leadership, authority figures when they are willing to speak to me as a respected peer instead of a subordinate, if we're going to put words on it. I am so comfortable with anyone who knows more than me if they just explain it of like, hey, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, and here is our goal from this. Great. Okay, here are my two questions. Oh, yeah, because A and B. That's why. Oh, sweet. Thanks. All right. I'll talk to you if I need you. And I'm fine with that. It's just a blind expectation that I personally struggle with.
I see that. Paint a vision, deliver the vision. Big area that a lot of leaders miss.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess you started to talk about some of your roles. So, thank you for providing the segue to get us out of military life
Yeah.
into the current day for you.
Yeah.
So are you managing teams right now, or what is your role with AWS?
No, so I'm an IC individual contributor. I'm a data scientist where I work amongst sales organization teams and support teams to essentially identify use cases can be different day to day, but a lot of my work right now is basically building out models to identify, let's say Adam's organization or Adam's a customer of AWS. How do we optimize his workloads currently that he has on AWS? And then further, what areas or workloads does he not have on AWS that we can programmatically put or suggest to him to get onto AWS? So a lot of it's coming from a value realization standpoint of like how much more revenue can we generate, operational efficiency as well. How can we scale these offerings out? How can we do better things like that? I like the tech side of the business, honestly, because when I joined Amazon, I was a non-tech individual. And obviously tech pays better. So that was one of the motivations, if we're going to be honest, to go do it. But also it's just a lot of challenge. I think the cool thing about tech is you don't understand a technical problem until you can get into it, and then you realize there's many ways to solve it. And to me, that's really cool because you can continue to just learn how to solve things at scale, and it helps me reframe a lot of problems in my life. And whether it's from like a data driven standpoint, that's something I will give Amazon a lot of credit for from a company. Like I've been with them almost 5 years now. They're very data driven, so if you come forward with a suggestion, and whether you're peer, subordinate, whatever you are, as long as you have data, it's always well received. And it could be data on, hey, we thought that X amount of users were using certain function. I came back, I've got data on this, whether it's like a telemetry data that you have or whatever it may be, right? That's just like a small use case. As long as you're coming armed with data and you could bring that and explain the why, it's very receptive. And to me, I love that. The other reason I really like Amazon is because it's just such a large company. So like one day, let's say I get tired of my job, I could go work on the like Amazon Alexa side of the business, or I could go work on the Prime side of the business, or there's just so many areas of our business that we have, and I really enjoy that. Now, do I see myself staying at Amazon long term? I don't know. I'm happy there now. I enjoy what I do now, but one day, if there was another opportunity, I wouldn't. I'd always be open to consider it, but I do think that Amazon offers a lot of really cool opportunities that other companies don't offer.
You mentioned solving some problems.
Yeah.
I want to ask a question on that. So problems pop up for you. Are problems that you are solving, are they code related? Are you doing actual like app coding or web development? What do problems look like for you?
Yeah, a lot of it's going to be essentially solving or like building out mechanisms or tools to build a more efficient model. So, like, I'll just give you a use case right now. Let's say we have a propensity model that's going to suggest, based on ABC inputs, how much a service might grow year over year based on those things. Well, if it's changing and those correlations of those inputs aren't necessarily producing the right output, it's going to be my job to essentially debug that, solve it. So, what is the right method to do it? And so, it's a lot of trial, a lot of error, a lot of testing. Yeah, I do code. I write a lot of code, mainly in Python and SQL is my two code bases. No app development, no web development. We have UX teams that do that, front end, back end teams as well, but I don't do that personally. A lot of it's just identifying operational efficiency errors and like how can I create a better model to do this or enhance our current model that we have for this offering. Like a really cool example right now, everybody's on Gen AI. Like obviously everybody wants to talk about AI this, AI that. Being a scientist, like I'm right at the heart of it. And many individuals come to me with like, hey, we've got this use case. We need an AI model for this, or we need an AI model for that. I like building out like natural language processing models because I think there's so many use cases of applicability. And what a natural language processing model is essentially it takes free text feedback. I'll just give you a really simple use case. Let's say you own a company and you send out surveys and you get textual feedback back, like what could we do better? And they're sending you back string text. A natural language processing model can go through all of those and identify the top classifications of areas of improvement or whatever you train that model to do. So to me, there's just so many use cases. And when I get at Amazon and I see how much data we have, it's just a continual opportunity to create something new. And that's what I really enjoy.
I'm gonna take a step back before we keep going farther down this rabbit hole.
Do it.
How did you end up at Amazon? What was your role at the beginning? Like,
Yeah.
what was that progression to get? Because like coding in Python and SQL is not just like, hey, you can do it now. Like there is
Yeah.
a progression to that. So like, can you give some background there?
Yeah, definitely. So when I started, I had some SQL background. Like I did SQL in educational standpoints, never used it in the military per se. But using it at like teaching, being aware of it, that kind of thing, and then using it in my day-to-day job at Amazon on the .com side. That's where it started. I saw the skills needed. I obviously learned Python on my own. I'm very self-motivated in terms of like learning new skills, learning new things. Like we have certifications. I have all of our AWS certifications just because I like to learn. And so that's not a problem to me. If I can identify a mountain, I can climb the mountain. And that was kind of how I viewed the tech role. My initial role was very programmatic, almost, hey, this is how we're going to do this, and like program managing a entire program or our portfolio. So kind of working cross-functionally with both engineering teams and mainly non-tech stakeholders to deliver these projects that we have in flight. That was kind of where I started. Working more so something at Amazon is there's always going to be a buffet of work. And like if you want to do something, you can lean in and find opportunities. I knew eventually I wanted to move over to a science role and like continue to get more technical. So I continued to just find work that related to my role, but how could I take this and go above and beyond to maybe automate a process with a Python script? And I would teach that to myself and kind of work through it. if I was to kind of pause this right now and somebody was to say like, hey, Jacob, how would you reapproach this? I think there's so many good tools with Gen AI that you can learn coding very quickly. Like the speed in which somebody can learn Python now opposed to 5 years ago is insane because you have your own personal mentor. It can debug it. You have no syntax. Like you can throw a syntax or a query in there and, hey, where's my syntax issue? Where a lot of it previously you're poking through and trying to identify that. So that's kind of my progression over there. A lot of it's been doing work myself and identifying like what I can do, and then mentorship as well. So another thing I like about Amazon is we have a lot of really good senior talent across the organization. I mean, we have 1.5 million individuals in the entire company. So there's bound to be some good mentors out there. And that's something I've always just leveraged. How could I find somebody that's done this for more time than me? How can I leverage their time and essentially learn from them and scale that out into my offering of my role?
Okay, so how do you find them?
Mentoring. So we have a few different ways. I'm not a big fan of like reaching out to somebody and be like, hey, Jacob, do you want to be my mentor? Like, I don't think that's very organic. I How I would rather approach it is when I see somebody what I identify as like, hey, that person's a killer in the role. They're very good. They stand out. I usually try to make a point to like reach out to them and somehow engage with them in their work of something like they're good at. So let's say there's someone that's very good at, I don't know, building out a predictor model, like a natural language processing model, and also embedding that with an ML model to do better predictive analysis. And I didn't know how to do that. Let's say I might go find somebody who's really good at that and work with them individually and say like, hey, here's my body of work, and try to continually do that and see how I can apply that in my role. I think mentorship at any company really needs to come organic if it's going to be long term. I don't think it should be like Jacob was assigned to Grant. Now Grant's Jacob's mentor. I don't think that's really ever going to be as effective as if it comes organically.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm gonna go a different route with it a little bit. You talked about you taught yourself Python. It's gonna be a two-part question. One, you said it's a lot easier to because of Gen AI to learn Python nowadays. So how would you recommend someone if they wanted to learn Python and learn how would you go about it now knowing what you know now? And then the second part is because of Gen AI and a lot of basic programming jobs are probably going to be taken over by that. So a lot of programming jobs, I mean, there's a chart out there that the open roles for software developers has dramatically decreased over the last 3 years. Do you think that that role is as important nowadays as it was 4 years ago?
Yes, I think the change of scope of work. So I'll answer the first question, or the second question first. I mean, does that role change? How does it change? I think that their focus of what they're doing is going to monumentally change because previously a lot of these engineers, whether they're an SDE, software development engineer, or maybe they're a manager as well, I think a lot of their time might have been in code reviews or debugging or things like that, or like understanding how to optimize it. Where a lot of the time now, there's a lot of these AI tools out there where you can give it your code directly, and it has been trained on so much data previously that it gives you better recommendations of your model of how it can be better optimized. You do still need the ability to understand how to interface with that, apply those changes, update it. But I do think that that level of effort is marginally lower than it used to be. So as a result, rather than spending all that time to learn X, you have free bandwidth of time. I do think engineers will take on more scope in the future, maybe be full end to end. Like if I was an engineer, I would also go learn some statistics. I would also learn some analysis of things like regression analysis, because you could not only be a front end individual, but you'd also understand how to operate your data on the back end and make insightful outcomes with it. If I was teaching myself how to do Python or any coding, to be completely honest, what I would do is I would get a course. Coursera is often really good. So if younger individuals are familiar with Coursera, you can go take essentially online courses pretty cheap. But where I think the big use case for learning a coding language right now is using an interface like ChatGPT, let's say, and giving it your code and just talking through it. You have a personalized mentor. You tell it what you want it to do, and it's very direct. So I think that's where I would go and say, hey, I'll give some context. Hey, I'm this software development engineer student learning how to do ABC. This is what I'm trying to do. Here's my code. I'm having troubles with lines 4, 5, and 6. Can you walk me through possible issues that I might have or kind of talk me through? And it's instantaneous. So Gen AI to me is great. I do think the bigger question though at the end of the day is like, how do we manage it at scale for a country? Because I think that's a very big question of like, does it need to be restricted? How do we manage it? How do we manage ethical AI? I think there's a lot of conversation that needs to happen there. And I'm definitely not the individual to be having those conversations, but I think it's something that needs to be thought about.
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point that like to you is just like normal, and I've used ChatGPT. The prompting of ChatGPT and how to ask the right questions is very important. It is a skill. So I think that's a good first step to understand that, like, just mess around with it and
Sure.
understand how to prompt it the right questions so it gives you what you're looking for. So I think that's good perspective to have. And just funny more on the have you the new chat gpt the new version that just came out like last week fixed this problem, but prior, did you see the bug where you'd say how many r's are in strawberry to chat gpt and it would
Yeah.
say two and it could not figure it out?
Yeah, and reverse coded
So
as
there's
well.
definitely
So there's a lot of use
yeah, there's
cases
definitely
for it.
still to it.
Yeah.
Yep.
The new model, so their new model is advanced reasoning, and I haven't used it as much. They're launching a new model actually called Strawberry fairly soon, and the reasoning and logic on it is insane. Like they tested against LSAT, like your law exam, your SATs, your bars, and just its ability to reason is impressive. I don't think for the individual who doesn't know anything about Gen A, they need to be scared. It's not like it's going to come in and like the old George W. Bush, they're taking our jobs kind of thing. But I do think there's definitely the possibility of that in the future. If you're not aware of like how to enable it, how to use it, I do think you're going to get caught with your pants down because it's a massive technical tool. And I think it's going to revolutionize the way many businesses are done. Will that, as a result, get rid of some businesses? Yes, but that's just kind of how things go. Let's rewind back to when we introduced cars, right? Like, I'm sure people are pissed off. Hey, you don't have somebody riding your horse around anymore. Like, that's going to get rid of some jobs, right? But also at the same time, we're going to get more rules in other areas. The thing I'm worried about is more so ethical AI and like how that works. Where does this data go at a large scale? How do I, as a customer, know that my data is not being used or trained for something other, maybe a malicious use case? I think that's something you've got to be aware of. And then also, I think more than anything, people just need to understand like the use cases that Gen AI can solve. If you're a brand new business owner, there's so many things it can do for you. If you're just trying to solve, like my mom, so my parents are, I wouldn't even call them technically advanced whatsoever. I showed my mom ChatGPT and she's blown away with it. Like she'll just like use it randomly to be like, "Hey, I'm cooking dinner and I've got this. What can I make?" She loves it. So it can range the spectrum of like what you're going to use it for.
Yeah, I forget its convenience. And maybe this is me raising my hand and showing my ignorance, but I have to remind myself, I write it on my calendar to use ChatGPT daily as a reminder because there's so much there. Like you said, it is such a powerful tool, especially as an entrepreneur running a small business.
Yeah.
I can throw in emails, I can throw in any excerpts, anything that I'm trying to publish or give out to my user base, and I can reword it, reshape it, work it, and change the audience or different things, like you said in the prompts. Once you get good at it, you can run multiple iterations. One of the things that I've done routinely is I've taken like 20 to 25 sentence like small essays effectively and just ask chat gpt to summarize it in 3 to 5 sentences, and that's that's been the most applicable use for me thus far. And it's crazy for me to even think like this is just the smallest little sliver of what this thing can do.
Yep.
That's why I said like I need to write it down so I can play around and try to just expand what my own mind will allow for what I can apply Chat GPT to.
I think that's a great point. Like how you worded that, what my own mind can allow before I then try to fit it in there. Because I think a lot of people take the reverse approach to it. They say, "Hey, here's this tool. What can it do?" And then they don't necessarily know the powers of the tool, and they often say, "Oh, it's just AI. It can't do this or it can't do that." And they're out right away on it. I do think, especially for like our boomer generation, I think they should be using the shit out of ChatGPT. But that's just me because a lot of them can't even figure out a lot of shit right now. And like ChatGPT is a pretty easy interface, and it would also get them more technically advanced. But again, that's just me.
I mean, if someone's listening to this and they want to get the acronyms, they can say, explain what Jake's
That's
saying
right.
to a third grader, and it'll reword it and tell you what
Yeah.
he's actually saying. So there's a use case for you. From going back to like the data side, and AWS is very involved with this because of their data storage on the cloud side, especially.
Yeah.
What are you seeing from the data side and what AWS is doing with it specifically?
From like a security standpoint, or what do you mean there?
Security, or like how it's evolving, and how like you were at AWS before ChatGPT
Yep.
blew up and came to the floor. So how has that changed over the last 2 years even?
We have internal models as well. So think about ChatGPT is owned by OpenAI, which is primarily owned by Microsoft. So it's all run on backend Microsoft Azure services, where we have some models and like we have Titan, Bedrock, things like that, which are foundational models. Obviously, any cloud organization is going to have secure training data that they're going to do, especially an organization this large. So I don't want to get into that as far as like, this is what Amazon's doing to ensure security of AI. It's definitely there. Me as a scientist, I have to go through so many hurdles being an internal individual just to get data, which is great because I think about it from like, I'm a customer of Amazon as well. So I do appreciate that not just anybody can get customer data and just kind of model it and analyze it. But with that being said, also when I need to go across so many different business units, it takes me 4 days, 5 days to get access to the data that I need because I've got to get VP level approval of like, hey, why does Jacob need this? What's the use case for it? So there is checks and balances on it on that front. The future of AI, though, I think is more so how are you going to automate it in a way where the tool or the model knows what you need before you know what you need. And I think a lot of that's going to be chat prompt based. And how do I give it the data it needs to give me that I need to get the proper data output? So there's a term called hallucinations. Obviously, you guys are probably familiar with it. There's a lot of AI models out there. Most people are familiar with just GPT because it's the most primary used one. But Llama, Meta's got some good ones out there with Llama. Anthropic's got some really good models with their Claude base, and those are a lot of what we're at AWS are building off of the Claude base. And I will say, in my experience, I think I can't say 100%. I think what I've seen with ChatGPT, there's more offerings than what we have across Amazon. However, I haven't modeled like customer data because I can't put it into ChatGPT, but we have an internal tool called Cedric, which is very similar. And the tools that thing can do is unbelievable. Like being able to just take your data sets and understand regression across metrics or understand like a correlation between two metrics to drive it. And then it gives me like a good starting place of like, okay, I didn't think about how these metrics work together. How do we go get some of this data and better overlay it? So it's all process of like learning, and that's what I like the most.
And I'm going to take a step back because like I hear this on a day-to-day basis of the company I work for. So I'm very familiar with Anthropic, Llama, et cetera, because I hear it daily. These are AI companies slash Meta's is Llama. Anthropic's a private company and they're not public. So just to give more background there and for the typical user, there is the debate going on. I mean, you look back at the dot-com bubble, you had the email, the internet, everything. And now people are saying that this is kind of that revolution now. How much farther, like you have the tech people such as yourself that are like, oh, the model has to get this much better. Like it can do this now, it can do this now. But general publics, they only want to do a couple things. Like they want the ease of use and that's it.
Yeah.
Are we there yet in your opinion, or do you think it still needs to expand further?
I'm very curious to see this new iPhone because, in my opinion, I think the winner of the AI model is going to be Apple. And it's only for one reason. It's only going to be terms of usability because they have individuals that have an iPhone. And like, let's be honest, 90% of what these models offer now, most individuals don't need. Like they really don't. So if we could identify how we can focus on that 10% and make it very specific to that user, which I do think Apple will eventually do, because think about it. They have all of your data from your iPhone, your clickstream data, what you're doing. If they could train this model that has a very, very specific use case and they have all your personalized things, it's going to be a very easy or a very frictionless UI for you on your iPhone. So I do think, no, we're not there yet, in my opinion, but I haven't seen like the new iPhone with the AI enabled with it. I do think it's very, very, very interesting that Apple went with ChatGPT as their main source for the model, which I'm kind of shocked. Maybe I'd like to see this. I think we could come back to this in like 6, 8 months. I think, do we see how good ChatGPT works on the iPhone, or does Apple take this and then they create a very simplistic AI model that's better than ChatGPT and they keep all the IP themselves and scale it themselves and they're the winner of the AI model kind of race? Because like what you're saying, most people don't need advanced reasoning to the level of output that's out there today, but it just isn't as usable as it should be for like my mom, hypothetically.
So, hand
Yeah.
up from somebody that's
Yeah.
not following this. I didn't know that this was a thing with the new iPhone. I'm learning about it on the
Yeah.
spot right here. I know our release date of this is not going to coincide with the release date of the new iPhone, but like I said, I had no clue that any of this was going on. So, what is the idea to a novice like me of why what's the purpose of adding AI to the phone? I get it. It's the next revolution. It can help with, I don't know, automating your searches, I'm guessing, but like how is it going to benefit the regular user of an iPhone?
More frictionless experience is really what the goal is. Like I can't speak like I've used iPhone 6, I think it's 16, right? The new one.
Yep.
I can't speak like I've used it, but I just know it's going to be AI enabled with ChatGPT within the native browser. So I haven't seen what that looks like as far as like what the experience is, but thinking about it conceptually, an AI model within something like that, it could be anything from, hey, a recommendation engine based on very specific data that your phone already has as a user that Adam's done. It could be something like, hey, here's searchability things like, hey, we know you're looking for ABC. It just knows you better to give you curated better results. Like if I could summarize it at the most simplistic level for a novice individual, it's how do I get to my end goal without my input being as strenuous as it is now. I think like the magic question you're trying to solve for here is how do I create a model that knows what I want before I give it the input? And that's kind of the goal here of simplicity on your iPhone. It
So
does
it's even more individualized than it ever has been before, pretty
for sure.
much.
Yep. You'll have your own
So
Yeah,
model
to
data.
add,
You go ahead.
I was going to add context. So for the listeners, we're recording this on September 15th. The iPhone comes out September 20th, next Friday, I believe. This will be released later than that. But yeah, so to give a high level example, I'm not saying that the iPhone will be able to do this initially with their new AI, but it's basically making Siri better. So it's basically like you land at the airport in Nashville. Hey, instead of going into your Uber app and then your Lyft app and seeing the different prices, just like, hey, I need a ride to downtown Nashville. Give me the best price ride, and it'll go through your apps and
oh,
your data and figure that out for you. So it's more just like making it more seamless for you as a user, so you don't have to do as many steps.
that's
Is
very
the
cool.
high level, easy way to explain an example. But there's other use cases, obviously. So to have access. So if you have like the Apple Home or whatever it's called in your house, it has all that data, your shopping data, it has your emails, it has anything that's in your eye, all that information, where you've eaten, where you're flying, and it can use that information basically.
That's cool.
Yeah, like another use case I just thought about is, let's say, right back to like the use case of Grant was saying, hey, I landed in Nashville, I need a ride. Similar thing, like, hey, I'm hungry, where can I go? And it would give you feedback like, hey, in the last 30 days, you frequented 4 Greek restaurants, 3 Italian restaurants, whatever. Here's one similar to that. Like it just knows you better and gives you curated outputs, which is going to be very interesting to see.
And maybe this is an oversimplification, but for people that are more like me, less tech savvy compared to you guys, it's almost like your social media algorithm. Just you now have an iPhone algorithm. You have your own personal algorithm.
Yeah, and like at the crux of it, it is a recommendation engine. Like that's really what it is. But from an AI standpoint, it's so much more data to be able to advance reason of like, hey, rather than just I'm going to recommend this because it's the next thing on my partition list in my model, it's going to go through advanced reasoning of like, hey, this is why I'm recommending this to Adam with advanced reasoning behind it. So I would say that's the most simplistic way to kind of back into it.
And I know we got on this topic. Sorry if I spaced out. Is this something that you are working on directly? You have anything?
No.
Okay.
I work directly with, we have a Bedrock team. So here at Amazon, Bedrock is our internal, basically our LLM that it's going to be built off of. LLM is large language model for those that didn't know. Bedrock is our internal tool. I work with them because I do leverage our Bedrock APIs very heavily to use a number of different use cases for my work. But as far as like building these out, no, we have applied scientists that do that, a lot of SDEs that do that, and there's a large set of manpower that's focused on that specifically.
So how much of a role does AI play in your daily life right now?
I would like it to do more. Like there's a lot that I could automate out. It's just a matter of keep in mind also, I've only been in this role for about 5 months, 4 months now. So still trying to figure everything out, the lay of the land, how we're going to scale this out. I do think future state of like where I plan to take a lot of the work with AI is going to continue to evolve of how can I operationalize this? How can I make a better framework with this? And like more so, how can I use this to make a user specific or a user centric experience? I think the biggest thing about AI is the ability to tailor it to the end user rather than just have a one size fits all. It's a, hey, here's a custom model for all of these different outputs, and it learns based on you over time. So It will work. I would say a lot of my work right now in AI is probably 20% of my work, where I do think in the future I could probably offboard maybe another 20% to AI, and it could be even more improved than what it is now. But I also want to like level set. A lot of individuals that might hear about AI, I think it's just like this plug and play solution of like, hey, we're going to go to AI, or like we're going to do this and it's going to be solved. Not necessarily. Like there's a number of different steps that come into process to ensure like proper validation, proper test samples. You're getting the outputs that you're desiring within statistically significant sound. So there's a lot that goes into it on the front side as far as building, developing. But once it is in place, I think the options that we can scale out are pretty heavy.
To take it out of the technical side a little bit now. So yeah, I mean, some users will love it, some won't.
Yeah.
Some won't follow the conversation. But I mean, you have the military background. You came from a small town. Now you're at AWS, have this data tech AI exposure as well. Knowing everything you know now compared to the public in general, through the military, through the AI side, through AWS, do you think there's a lot of perspective that you have that's worrisome or has helped you more compared to the general public?
I'd say helped because it just gives awareness of different inputs of like how things will work. I think my military experience helped a lot to learn how to work with different people, as far as like where they're from, what their main objectives are, how they're going to get there, how we're going to like align from a unified vision and cast that vision and then deliver on that vision and derive it. I think my tech background now comes in because we're right at the crux of like everything evolving within AI. There's still obviously a lot of work that needs to be done. We're still very early in it. It's nascent technology. But I think being able to understand how we can apply this helps me in my current role because it, like Adam said earlier, you've got to kind of expand your own personal mind of like, how can we apply this to different things? And I think I have a better maybe approach to that than some people do just because of the experiences I've had of like, hey, here's maybe a good fit, and then starting to explore that and going a little bit deeper in those areas.
I want to shift again. I guess it's more on this bigger picture side of things because we have gotten really specific. We briefly touched on mentorship and what that means to you, how to go about cultivating those relationships. That was one of the things that Banco and I really wanted to harp on when we created this podcast, understanding people's personal processes, how they got to where they are now, what kind of grounds them, and what enables them to feel successful on the daily. So, are there certain things that kind of keep you grounded or make sure or offer a reminder that you are moving in a direction
Yeah.
that you are comfortable with or happy with? And what do those things look like for you?
First thing that comes to mind, I've got to give credit where credit's due. Andy Frisella puts out something I learned about this years ago called the power list. Like just what to do. I do something very similar to that. So I can't be like, hey, Jake created this himself because that's where I got the ideology probably 6, 7 years ago and just kind of carried it through. So like, for example, just work related, I always have very much to-do lists and I've got a calendar here with W's and L's on it. Did you win the day? Did you lose the day? I every single day I go in and I've got 5 key tasks that I need to get done every single day. Now, what are those 5 key tasks? That's going to differ day to day, but it can't be something as minor as go to the gym, right? Because I do that in my daily schedule already in my organization. So like I've got 5 key things that I need to get done tomorrow, whether I get them done by 10 a.m. or whether I get them done by 3 p.m. That'll be a win for me once I get those done. So my key goal is to get everything done for a win on those days. And that's where it kind of comes in from like the self-discipline of doing this for so long, because being that I create my own list, my power list that I do every day, sure, you could go in there and you could put things like walk my dog, eat breakfast. That's not getting you advanced. Like that's not furthering where you need to go objectively. So if somebody was going to do something similar, I would say very clearly identify things that are going to get you forward on a day-to-day basis, but don't overthink it because it is very useful to have that momentum and see all of those W's on your calendar to say, hey, look, I feel like I'm not producing or I'm not doing well. And you go retrospectively look at your prior month and you have 28 wins and you can start to understand that and kind of carry that momentum into it. That has helped me a lot. Another thing that helps me a lot is I'm a very big morning person as far as like productivity. I think that for me, at least, when I wake up 6 a.m. and I can get all of my things done and I can start working 7:30 to like 10:30, I am far more productive in those 3 hours than I am usually the rest of the day. So everyone operates differently, but that's just for me. I like to focus on things that I need to get done right away. I'm not a big fan of meetings early in the morning. And a few reasons for that is I've got other things that I need to do, primarily just to like make sure that my momentum starts in the right direction and I can start to actually chalk up some early wins. And also I think a meeting can be pushed back a little bit later in the day because we've got other things we need to deliver on individually first and foremost, but that's just kind of my personal approach.
I like that mentality, especially from someone that does work mostly in a silo. My business right now it's four of us. It's our lead tech developer, me and my other co-founder, and then our director of operations. And we're all in different locales. So the only time we are ever together is on Zoom. But as a result, there are certain projects that I have that take up my entire day. And oftentimes those days feel like my least productive, or they'll feel like losses because I only completed one larger thing. Versus just the other weekend, I traveled to Chicago, see some friends, and I had 8 tasks that I knew I needed to get done, but they were all small, and I was able to knock them out in an hour and a half. So it felt like the single most productive day of all time. And in the grand scheme of things, like working on one project all day versus doing 26 things over the course of one day, one isn't necessarily more productive than the other. It's just kind of how those things get framed. And I've struggled with that. Writing things in a calendar has helped me tremendously. I like your idea of kind of assigning like importance to them. I know a lot of people have had success with that. I haven't heard it called a power list before. That's new phrasing to me, but I'm certainly a fan of that kind of mentality.
Yeah, chunk it out, get it done for me at least. I'm a big list guy. I got to see it put out. My brain doesn't work real well keeping all those thoughts in it, and then I end up forgetting a few things. So I try to identify, like for my power list at least, I've got the list that I use. Like here's my actionable list of things that I'm going to knock out. But then I also have a list over here and a few others that I think about things that need to get done. So as I'm building out my power list, like for tomorrow, I'm looking at all of my open items that I need to do, and I'm trying to say where can I push the ball forward on most of these, and then put those into my day. I also have to take into consideration like what does my schedule look like? Do I have back-to-back meetings all day, and I want to have like a full blocked work day? So like your example of like working on one big thing and not feeling like you're pushing that ball in the right direction because there might not be a whole lot of milestones you completed. Those are what I call like big work days. And I find myself going into those not as excited, but when they're done, I'm more excited. So like when I have a day when I know I just am grinding all day, it's like, but I know there's not going to be really anything to show for it. Those aren't my favorite days, I'm not going to lie. But at the end, once they're done, I feel like they're the most impactful because I have such a large body of work that I've done in a period of time. But going into it up front, they're kind of a bear for me.
Yeah.
So how long, just to add perspective and make the listeners feel that they're not behind on things,
Yeah.
how long did it take you to figure out you're a morning person, this powerless works for you? How long did it take you to figure out this routine or this kind of work schedule type of thing worked for you?
Um, I learned pretty quick. So I don't necessarily want to feel like individuals might feel like they're behind on something. The military is really what taught me. I've got to give it back credit to that, like the structure of getting that in place. And that's why I'm so thankful. Being a young individual where I didn't necessarily have life direction or my individual thing set up, that helped me structure it. I do think a lot of it was me coming to the plate and actually actioning on it and doing it and having the discipline to do things day in and day out. But once I really can identify, like, hey, this is what needs to be done, here's what's able to be done, that outcome of feeling good about doing is what motivates me personally. And I think it really goes back. This is kind of a train of thought I just had. It goes back, for me at least. I think people are one of two ways. You either love to win or you hate to lose. And I hate to lose. Like, I hate to lose. I don't mind winning as much, but like, I hate to lose. And like, when I put the L's on my calendar, I hate those. So that's something for me, and my calendar's right here. And I took an L last week, and I shouldn't have, but it was just poor time management on my part. I had things to do, I had other obligations, and just didn't get it done. But typically, when that happens, I then add that work to the next day. And I know those days are going to be a little bit more tough. And previously, when I kind of took that approach, because I know it's the right thing to do, that work needs to get done as soon as possible, I would almost take a lighter day intentionally and like building out my list of like, hey, I've got this bleed over from yesterday. Let's make today a little bit lighter. But I feel like that only regresses you. So I'm a big believer of like, if I didn't get my work done yesterday, I almost self punish myself the next day and then I'll get back on track. I'm not saying everybody should operate that way. That's just kind of how I do it. That's what works well for me.
And along those same lines, how long roughly on a given day do you take to build out your list?
20-30 minutes maybe. Like I'll start thinking about things, and then like as I start to structure out my day, I'm like, hey, I am doing 3 things that are very similar, and these other 2 things are going to take a lot of my time. Maybe I find 2 other things that are similar to this and then move these 2 things to the next day, so I can be most efficient on the most things as possible while still actually pushing this forward day to day. The one thing I will really foot stomp here, though, if somebody's going to do this, I would make sure that you're challenging it, that those things are like difficult tasks that are noteworthy. So, like, I'll just give you one. I've been doing this for years. I clean my house every single, like, vacuum it. I've got golden retrievers. They're hairy as hell. That used to be like years ago when I wasn't as clean as I am now, just because it's a discipline factor that I have. It would be like clean the house today. And that might be one of my 5 things, right? By no means that's not touching my list these days. Go to the gym. That's not touching my list these days. But like if somebody's brand new and they're trying to start habits, and like let's say they want to get back into the gym and they haven't been for years, I think like, hey, 45 minutes or an hour in the gym could be on their power list for a period of time until that's in their schedule and they're disciplined to do it. And not to dovetail that in, but I do think that fitness obviously has a big impact on like how to structure your day. I'm a big believer in that. Like having a proper fitness regimen and going to the gym, whatever the gym looks like to you, whether that's running, swimming, aerobics, whatever you do, I think individuals need to stay active because it's not only going to help them in the current state, but it's obviously going to help you long term as well.
Yeah, and just a story popped in my head. I don't remember where I heard it from. It was on a different podcast, but it was basically not. It was like getting to the basic level. There was a guy that wanted to lose 100 pounds or something, so he would drive. The gym was like 30 minutes away from him. To start the habit of going to the gym, he would literally just drive to the gym, walk in, be there for 5 minutes, and then leave. But he would do it every single day. So it was a habit of just getting to the gym first. That was the first step, and then building on that. So like just giving that perspective, everybody's going to be different and what that looks like.
How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Like same thing, fitness, life, whatever it is, like one bite at a time. I think many people on the fitness side of it overthink fitness. Fitness is super binary. You need 3 things to succeed. You need good nutrition, you need discipline, you need accountability. Like, or to stay to your task. Like you're disciplined to a structure, whatever that looks like. You have good nutrition and you're showing up every single day. Like whatever that looks like. For me personally, I like going to the gym 7 days a week because like that's just what I enjoy. I don't go because I think it's like better to do or worse to do. But on the day where I used to only do 6 days a week, I felt like that 7th day I wasn't really maxing it out or like getting a win out of it. So I just go to the gym 7 days a week and it's a requirement. I haven't missed a day at the gym in almost 4 years now. And I don't say that to like flex by any means, but I think if I didn't have that, my structure, my day would personally be way off. I use that as a tool to help me navigate my days personally. And it helps as well because you can get strong, and that's cool.
We kind of circled off of it for a minute, but I do want to call back on your answer to the time you take to build your list. I want to highlight that it is okay to spend time planning.
For sure.
And one of the things that I think is asinine that I've heard in the business world before is like putting organize on your calendar is worthless, or like putting go through emails on your calendar is worthless. I think that's so dumb to me because it is, yes, it might not make your power list because it's an expectation at this point, if we're putting it in the context specifically for you, Jake. But in the grand scheme of things, that stuff is very important. And why keep it in your head? That's just more stuff you have to worry about. If you put it on a sheet of paper, you can budget time for it accordingly. And if something is going to be important enough that you are going to care about it and do it every single day, you should budget time for it. It's that simple to me. Like that's why once I started very similar to what you were saying about going to the gym, I needed to put on my calendar at the beginning of using a calendar, put stuff on calendar. It was like an oversimplification, but it became like my 7 a.m. task every day. It was just like build out calendar, build out calendar. And being able to check that off meant a lot for me, much like what you said about going to the gym.
Momentum's huge, man. Like being able to do those big or small, They're obviously they add up. They add a lot of value there.
I will step in and say I'm not a person that writes things down. It's in my head. And Jake pointed to that when he was like, he doesn't specifically just sit down and is like, all right, I'm making my power list. Like you're thinking about it throughout the day of like what you have to do. And then like as things build, you'll start to build that list. So it's not like, hey, I'm sitting down for 20 minutes right now, writing down my power list. That's it. Like there's stuff going on in the head. And it does, but at the same time, I don't write things down. But if I do have an idea and I need it to get out of my head because I can't sleep or something, then I will shoot an email off or I will write it down. So at least it's out of my head and gone. But I think it's person to person there.
Stylistic feedback I'm going to give here, and like if I was to redo it completely, how I take notes or like how I'm sort of like documenting what I would do it all in a digital format because it's not scalable. Like I can't go into here and I can't do a control F of like, hey, or I can't manage my time or things like that. So if I'm a brand new individual and I'm trying to figure out how to get more organized, I would probably lean into doing something digital where I could just scale it a little bit better than I do now. And like I'm sure the question might be like, hey, why don't you do that now? You have every opportunity. Yeah, I could, but it's still difficult for me because I'm super used to like this and I like crossing things off. But like if I was to redo everything and try like to build out something completely new, I would probably do it in a digital format so I could have something to trace a little bit better.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, we've been on here for an hour and 40 minutes, I believe. So it's been a lot. I'm
Well,
not gonna
you and I
ask any
have
more
Banco.
questions.
Let's
True.
make
Yeah.
that.
Hour 20 for Jake. But
Can't tell time, man.
yeah, I will pass it to you, Jake. I have no questions. Thank you for like taking your time out of your Sunday to come and talk to us and share your story and experiences. We'll probably have you on because there's a lot more we could dig into there and probably go on forever. But I'm just gonna leave it open to you. I don't know if Adam has any questions left, but anything that we didn't cover that you feel like you wanted to say or express here?
Um, Nothing that we really covered on. I would say like some things if I was a young individual watching this, like a young dude trying to come up, there's a few like key things I would give them feedback on that I didn't do well. I read a lot, well, as like I love to read, but that wasn't me when I was younger. I hated to read. I think it is so beneficial to read the right things because you get a viewpoint into other individuals' minds and their lives. And you can understand, you can kind of take these things and put them into your life. So the one thing that just kind of like when you said, is there anything else you'd like to talk about? If I was a young individual, I would really structure reading into my day, like whether it's 10 minutes, 10 pages, and like get good quality reading in. Number one book I'll always plug, Relentless by Tim Grover, is the best book personal development wise that I've ever read. So Tim Grover was Kobe and Michael Jordan's performance coach. He's got a book called Winning as well. Phenomenal books. But yeah, just read the right things. It's big. I think a lot of people overlook the input output. Like I think maybe I have that viewpoint from technical, like the technical framework has kind of helped me view that. But good quality data in, good quality actions out. And I think reading is one of those big things that I would give people feedback on outside of structure and fitness. Go to the gym. Don't be lazy.
Yeah, and I'll build off that. I'll throw in podcasts if you don't really want to read all the time. You can definitely listen to different podcasts. And I'll quote Alex Ramosi, and Jake's probably familiar with this, is there's people in history that have already done whatever you want to do. So why waste your time making the mistakes that they had where you can just literally either buy their time or learn from their mistakes and jump that hurdle way faster.
Hormozy is one of the best out there. Like if somebody's new and they like don't or they're not familiar with like good content, where to go, because there's a lot of bullshit out there. Like just straight up. It's a money making gimmick. There's a lot of like entrepreneur life coaches out there. If I was young, I think it would be challenging now to cut through a lot of the noise and find out what's good. I will say Alex Hormozy is arguably one of the best that's ever done it, in my opinion.
I still haven't consumed any of his content. Hand
He's
up.
great.
Banco consumes enough for this entire podcast, so I just try to get the cliff notes from him. I do want to make one statement. I think something we missed here, maybe it's because we got so deep in the weeds on a few topics, is we didn't talk about any of your work as a professor. And I guess we'll just have to bookmark that for future episode and talk about how you got into those roles. So maybe start to think about it, put it on your power list for the next, I don't know, 6 months. And when we have you back, you'll just have the best content ever.
I'd be happy with that, and I'll make it on time. That one, I promise that I won't be late.
Maybe. Well, time zones are tough. Central
Fingers-
versus Eastern time is tough.
Fingers crossed, man. We'll make that hour change.
Well, we do really appreciate you coming on. This was a cool conversation for me because I got to ask a lot of questions selfishly that have been running through my head about experiences that I don't have, whether it is military, tech world stuff. This was cool, and I'm appreciative to Banco for bringing you on. This was awesome. Thanks for sharing your life experience with us.
Thanks for your time, Noah. Thanks for having me on, and thanks GB for the invite. Adam, it was great to be here as well. So thank you.
Great. Banco, are you signing us off? You want me to do it today?
Nah, you got it. You're good.
All right. Well, everyone, thanks for the conversation. Thanks for hopping in. I don't want to do the layback podcast outro. I have to think of something cool for this. So, Jacob, leave the guest with something cool.
Don't be a bitch. There's
All
always
right.
work to do. Don't be a bitch. That's what I got for you.
Okay. All right. I guess we're cutting on that.
That's it, man. Thank y'all. Thanks for your time today.
Bye, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Grant here. Thanks for tuning into the show. If you could like, share, and subscribe, we'd greatly appreciate it. Also, if you think you or someone you know has a good life story to tell, we are always open to guest suggestions. You can send those suggestions to our email, tworkpod@gmail.com. Thanks again for the support.